Hi, I'm Akuyluk Edwardson. I'm the cultural educator, artist, mother, and Arctic person who put this cultural learning resource together. If you'd like to learn more about who I am and the work that I do, please visit www.creativedecolonization.org. This cultural learning resource is going to dive into the work of William A. Qquilluq, who wrote the People of Kauwerak, Legends of the Northern Eskimo, with the assistance of Laurel Bland. William Qquilluq was told old stories from his grandfather, who he lived with as a young child. He was born in 1869 in Iñupiat, or Point Hope, and moved back to Akuyluk when he was 7. Akuyluk was a village in the central island area of the Seward Peninsula and is where his parents and grandparents were from. William Qquilluq died in 1972. There were many people in Alaska when the second disaster came to the earth. This time, it was a great flood. Water covered all of the land. Before the time of the flooding, 4 Inuit families found out how to survive, and they lived through the second disaster. One night, a man called Qquilluq dreamed a terrible dream. He was in great terror. His life was in danger. In the dream, he was standing on the very tip of a high mountaintop. When he looked around, there were no other mountains. There was no land around about except where he stood. There was water as far as he could see. He was alone. He got so scared he called out, "Is there anyone to help me out of this bad trouble I have?" A voice answered his call. He looked around. He saw a man. The man was the exact same image of himself. He was standing on top of the water. The image of Qquilluq said, "Go to your people. Tell all of them there will be a great flood coming." Qquilluq woke up. It was the most miserable dream he had ever had. He told his people about the horrible dream. They just laughed at him. They said to each other, "How can water flood over all this land with the big mountains like we have? We will have lots of safe spaces if there is a flood. How can a man believe only a dream?" Qquilluq told the people he saw himself standing on the water. He told them when his image talked to him, it seemed like he was talking from another place. He told everyone about the man image and his advice. He told me to tell all you people to build a raft and to prepare for a big flood. Qquilluq said to 3 of the men who listened to him, "We must follow my dream. We must build a raft of logs. It must be big enough so waves of the storms will not reach on top of it. It has to stand a high sea. We must use big tree logs and bind it with tree roots. Roots are the strongest binders there are in the world." Soon all the earth was swallowed up by water. There were no mountains. The people could see no land anywhere. Qquilluq and the others saw something they had never seen before. No one had ever heard of such a thing. It was a rainbow. They pointed to it and talked about it. They were kind of afraid, too. Every day after the calm came, the rainbow appeared. It had many colors in it. The people decided it was a sign the flood would go away. That night, Qquilluq had another dream. He saw a great man looking down at him from the top of a mountain peak. This was a mighty and giant man. Qquilluq had never seen anyone like him. His voice came out like a roar. The voice said, "You will be a father of great people. For generation after generation. Prepare, and I will make you a man honored by your people. Your son and your son's sons will spread all over this country and live by the land. You have been through the second disaster. You saved your family and the families of others. Your wisdom and pride saved you and them. They will share with you in this land." I want to make a point here that when this was written, it was written into English, during a time when patriarchy was not even questioned in America. And so the words men and boys and sons were used as default. And so in my mind, I separate that to people, because it's more than sons and fathers, right? So I also include that in here because that is how William Qquilluq wrote it. So I want to honor that. There will be a new generation beginning. It will spread all over this land. We must tell them about their ancestors who survived the first disaster when the sun and moon eclipsed. The new generations must know about Akuyluk and Selimu. They must know about the second disaster. They must remember these things for their coming generations. They must obey the things our old people taught us. We must all remember and keep the customs of our ancestors and teach them to the new generations coming along. Our children will become many people in this land. The others thought about what Qquilluq said. They saw they would have to start a new life, but they must still keep the customs of the generations before them. They saw they had a wise man among them in this second disaster time. It was his wisdom that saved them. They were the only survivors of the great flooding of their living place. The water dropped down more and more, and the land showed. It was like Qquilluq told them. The second disaster was over. The Inuit began to spread all over. They settled along the seacoasts. In different places, the people began to speak different dialects of the Inuit language. This happened even though they were not very much distance away from each other. Even so, they could still understand each other when they wanted to. This was true for people to talk to each other from where Point Barrow is to Cape Darby. They call their language Iñupiat. Farther south, the Inuit got a different language that is hard for others to understand. This is true as far as past the mouth of the Yukon River to where the rivers come to the places where the Indians live. The southern Inuit call their language Yupik. The Aleut people on the islands have their own language, and it is not much like Inuit at all. The Inuits of the north, even though they have different ways of saying things, can still talk to each other from Alaska clear over to the other side of Canada. These changes all came after the terrible times of the second disaster. Our ancestors, Qquilluq's people, were our forefathers. The earth has not changed much since their time. After the survivors of the second disaster settled down into the useful land, Qquilluq told his wife, "I am going out for a few days alone. I will be all by myself." He left the others behind and went away. The first evening, he stayed in a place where there were no signs of men. There were only human bones left. He gathered all the pieces of a man together and laid them on a flat rock. He laid every bone where he thought was the right place for it to be. Finally, he was done. The skeleton seemed to be looking at him. Qquilluq thought, he is one of those people that drowned in the flood. Whenever he looked at the dead man's skull, it smiled back at him. In the morning, Qquilluq roamed around his campsite looking for more skeletons. Soon he found another person. He gathered up all the bones he could find. All at once, Qquilluq went to sleep. He did not remember anything at all. Suddenly, he woke up. He heard someone talking to another person. Without moving or opening his eyes, he laid there and listened to two people talk. He could tell clearly that one of them was a woman. The woman said, "I miss one of my bones in my hand. It hurts." The man said, "Oh, I would do anything for him. I would contact him my time or help him if he needed some help. What if he could only find our missing bones? We would feel better." "How can we reward him if he does find them?" the woman said. "I would talk to him, even though I am invisible." The woman said, "I would help him too, and do anything he wanted that I could do." It was the missing rib. He was sure glad to find it. Now there was one more piece of bone to find. Much later, he found that too. After Qquilluq finished the drum, the spirits taught him how to sing and drum for the 4 songs he had learned. Then they taught him to dance to the songs. He learned everything and remembered it for all time. Qquilluq talked to the spirits, and they told him they were his helpers. They told him he was now an Iñupiat, user of spirits, also known as healer, medicine men. Sometimes they were judges, and they even knew how to conduct surgery. They told him he was now an Iñupiat because he had helped them. They promised to help him and to do what he wanted them to when he called to them with their songs. Qquilluq and the spirits talked a long time, and he learned how those spirit people would work for him and how he could help his people because of their power. And I want to point out here that this, communicator with spirits, this user of spirits, was first given for helping purposes. Qquilluq went back to his people to be the first Inuit Iñupiat. It seemed he had found out a lot of useful things, but he had learned some bad things too. He became a very powerful man, and some people were afraid of him. One day, that Iñupiat left his body to fly away in space. He did not come back. Before he became so powerful, the first Iñupiat had taught several others about the spirits, and so they learned to be Iñupiat too. When the first Iñupiat did not come back from his travels in space, the people knew that one of the others had gotten the best of him. They did not know who. I also want to point out here that this is a political system that's similar to other political systems, with people in power eclipsing each other for different reasons. Power hierarchies can be useful. They can also be damaging to a society if people are at odds with each other. The history of the Inuit shows that after each disaster, one following the other, the people learned more new things to add to what they already had learned. After the second disaster, they learned about spirits, and some of them became Iñupiats and shamans. Iñupiat is the word for shaman. Suddenly, it turned into cold weather. Soon the water stopped running. It froze over. Snow began to fly. Big storms came. This was in the Inuit calendar at the end of the moon of Iñupiat. The north wind was a very strong wind. People from all over, from Norton Sound up to the far north, could not go out hunting or fishing. The inland people all starved to death except 2 people living at the upper end of Tuksuk Channel, 3 at Sinruk, and 2 at Cape Darby. The big winter lasted all the time from Iñupiat until the next first of the Inuit calendar year, the start of the moon of Iñupiat. There were 18 months of cold, hard winter weather. The only warm weather they had was 2 spring weather months during Akuyluk and Iñupiat. So I want to point out that these ways of saying these months are not familiar to me, and I haven't seen them in any modern day month definitions for month. And that's interesting to think about because throughout time, not only has our environment changed, but the words we use to describe months, seasons, climate changes along with our land, along with our sea. So we're very, very much looking towards the environment around us for clues for innovation, but also for language. There are many words for different months depending on the region you come from. I grew up with Iñupiat for June. That's the time when caribou give birth. One of my favorite ways to say April is Nutuxivik. This is from the Iñupiat English dictionary that Dr. Edna McLean put together. She has a quote in here. In January, often called Nutuxivik, moon of whittling, the Umaliks, whaling captains, summoned their crews to scrape all the wooden paddles and spear handles. In the hunt, these must look new and unblemished because they were then less liable to be seen by the whale. But if seen, they were pleasing to the whale in this condition. One of my favorite ways to say May, again found in that Iñupiat English dictionary by Dr. Edna McLean, is Suvlurvik. Suvlurvik was described in an interview in this way. It was Suvluravek Tutkik, the moon when rivers flow, a season when everyone felt free and happy. You know, something else that's an interesting word, an interesting seasonal word, is Umeaqavik. And Umeaqavik is the months of April and May. Umeaq is boat, and we hunt whale in April, bowhead whale, and beluga whale in April and May all over the north. So I like Umeaqavik to describe that 2-month period, which is also in that dictionary.